child who is able to play again because someone donated a heart, or a loving father because he has your liver. Your lungs could give Super Uncle Joe a second chance, and your kidney, it could help Grandma pump iron. You're not just donating your organs, you're giving life. Organ donation. Join the movement and commit today at blood.ca. Canadian Blood Services. It's in you to give.
My name is Caitlin. I'm 6 years old. I like to go to the beach with my cousins. When I was a baby, I was very sick. And then I got a liver transplant from an organ donor. It saved my life.
This gift of life was made possible by an organ donor. Imagine what you could make possible. Sign up as an organ, eye, and tissue donor. Go to organdonor.gov.
Thank you for tuning in to Rebuilding the Black Family with Pastor Carl Lewis and myself, Clement Humphrey. Rebuilding the Black Family is dedicated to discussing principles essential to building strong, productive, and successful families. Please join the conversation by liking, following, and sharing us from our Facebook page. And that's facebook.com/Foundation for Life Church and facebook.com/SPR Live FM. Now, let's join Pastor Carl and me, Clement Humphrey. Well, good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining me right here in Rebuilding the Black Family. Of course, my name is Claremont, and Pastor Carl is on his way in. But we're planning to have a very wonderful evening or afternoon today, as we are going to be talking about the Men of Honor Conference. And the Men of Honor Conference is going to be hosted by Foundation for Life Church and host Pastor Carl Lewis. And the preacher of that weekend is going to be none other than Pastor Robert Martin. So we're going to be telling you a little bit about Pastor Robert Martin in a moment, but we want you to stay tuned, stay locked right here on SPR Live FM as we bring to you just a quick song as we get Pastor Robert online, because it's going to be Men of Honor, and of course Men of Honor do have victory, right? So just stay tuned, stay locked right here in SPR Live FM.
You can go tribulation, he'll surely bring you out. Victory!
Well, thank you for joining us right here on SPR Live FM, Rebuilding the Black Family. Are you good?
I'm good. Please accept my apologies.
No, actually, if you can bring that a little bit in front of you so I can get you directly there. Yeah,
yes,
we good. Well, as I told you before, that we're going to be having what we called Men of Honor Conference. It's Foundation for Life Church, and the host pastor is Pastor Carlos, who's presenting this. It's going to be held on June the 22nd at 7 p.m. on Saturday, June the 23rd at 9 a.m. And this is Foundation for Life at 55 Beverly Hills Drive. And the host, the special guest pastor will be Pastor Robert Martin. Let me tell you a little bit about Pastor Martin. Pastor Martin serves as senior pastor of Progress Christian Church in Oak Park, Michigan, United States of America. I had never used that word in a long time. I would say the USA. Okay. Before accepting the divine call on his life for ministry, Pastor Martin served as a police officer for 15 years with the Detroit Police Department and later promoted to sergeant. He served the last 2 years of his career with United States Department of Justice Drug Enforcement Administration. In 1997, Pastor Martin attended the Word of Faith Bible Training Center, where he graduated in 1999 with honors. Pastor Martin served as a full-time district pastor, being responsible for the pastoral care of nearly 7,000 of the 21,000 members of Word of Faith International Christian Center, Southfield, Michigan headquarters location. Wow. In 2004, Pastor Martin served as a senior pastor of Word of Faith International Christian Center in Toronto, Canada for 7 years until being reassigned back to the States. Pastor Martin is a true leader with a servant's heart who continues to serve God and his people with excellent professionalism and enthusiasm. He teaches the Word of God with boldness, passion, and a taste, humor, whereas you will never be bored under his teaching. His preaching and teaching is often flavored with oneness and unity in order to equip and encourage God's people to walk and soon run in their full potential and God-given identity. Pastor Martin is joyfully married to his wife Grace of 32 years and are proud parents of 3 successful adult sons and have 4 grandchildren. And Pastor Carl, I'll let you do the honors.
Oh, yeah. Just before we get to speak to or really interview Pastor Robert Martin today, let me say this again. We talked about the Men of Honor Conference. We're mentioning it a lot because we want as many men to be in attendance as possible. The purpose of this conference is really to empower men to fulfill our destiny. And so that's the goal. And as men goes, I mean, all the stats, whether it's Christian stats or secular stats, as men go, so goes the family. So when we emphasize men, it is not at the expense of women. It is because of the vital role and purpose men fulfill. And so, we want men to fulfill their purpose. We want stronger businesses, stronger government, stronger communities. And Jesus gave us the model for an example for manhood, and so we want to learn, what it is to be a man. The man had our community, as it is, media puts out a whole lot of different streams and definitions of what a man is. Well, the Christ-likeness and manhood are synonymous, and so the more we get to understand who Christ is and who He is in us, is the more we can be the real men who were born to become. And so I'm going to put it out there again. Ladies, help us to spread the word about this conference. Encourage the men in your life, whether it's your spouse, your relatives, friends, co-workers, whoever they are, invite them to come to this event. It's going to be a tremendous time. Men of Honor Conference, helping men to be the men that God's called them to be, helping them to overcome obstacles to their success. Also want to say, if you're a man out there and you want to be a part of this in a help supportive capacity, so you have gifts, you have talents, whether they're musical gifts, administration gifts, technical gifts, that you'd like to come alongside us in a supportive capacity to help us put on a very successful event to help men, please drop me a line, give me a call, let me know, I want to be a part of this in a support capacity to help you to build men and to help men in this conference. And as Clement already alluded to and mentioned, that our guest for this conference will be Pastor Robert Martin from Oakdale, Michigan. And again, it's a great conference you want to miss. I got to know Pastor Robert Martin a number of years ago while he was pastoring here in the city of Toronto. And I really appreciated we became friends. Hopefully he still considers me a friend. We'll find out. But just a very good man. I just respect and appreciate his character, his faithfulness, just his motivation. Another thing, too, is his dedication to his wife and children, and his family. That all comes out in his life and getting to know him over the years. Of course, his obedience to the call of God on his life, and is a gifted communicator, a strong leader and teacher. And so I'm telling you, we're really looking forward to, as opposed to, in addition to me just spending more time with him and getting to, connect again. And so it's going to be a great time. So, Pastor Robert Martin, I hear you're online. Been waiting for me. Thank you so much for tuning in today.
Yes,
great to have you.
I'm here. How are you?
How are you? I'm doing well, thank you. Very good to have you.
Well, it's good to hear your voice, Pastor Carl and Brother Humphrey. I want to thank you, first of all, for allowing me to be the guest on your show today. Mm-hmm. And I tell you, yes, Pastor Carl, you are still my good friend.
I was getting a bit concerned here, I'm joking, I'm messing with you.
Yeah. I thought that might have been a trick question at first, but yeah.
Pastor Robert, just so that, this might be an introduction to some people. I know some of our listeners know you personally, but, there's many out there who'll be listening to this program and who don't know you. And so, just by way of introduction, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? And let's start off with, how did you first come to know and put your faith in the Lord Jesus Christ? So let us know a bit more about you, if you don't mind.
Oh wow, man! I tell you, that's a testimony in itself. I mean, I wasn't born again or saved early on in life, mm-hmm. but I kind of got converted by a young lady in university, mm-hmm. Which is now my wife for 32 years, and right. She introduced me to Christ, and I gladly accepted. And later on, man, I just continued to walk that walk of Christ as much as I could as a young man coming from a single family home, mm-hmm. Raised by my mom. Mm-hmm. But anyway, basically just walking that walk and going to church, mm-hmm. Once I got saved, and basically trying to find out what I could do to be a help and a benefit to the body of Christ in the church I was attending at that particular time in my young Christ walk. Mm-hmm. And then later on, like Brother Humphrey said earlier, I accepted the call on my life and went to Bible school. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And going to Bible school, that was an eye-opening experience as well, mm-hmm. which allowed me to see a lot of things at that time from God's perspective, because at that time, that was one of the challenging times in my life. Where I was a Detroit police officer. There weren't many. I know there were some, but there weren't many that I knew about at that time that were Christians and police officers. Like I said, it's a challenging thing to be as a born again, saved, spirit-filled cop, And I tell you, either they liked you or they didn't like you. They loved you or they hated you. But the whole idea was, with that being in mind, walking that Christian walk has always been one of I wanted to please God, even in any profession. That time was a law enforcement profession. And I will tell you, God has been a covering. He's been a protector. He's been a shield. The Holy Spirit's, been a guide and a lead, and stand by every step of the way. And I will tell you, not to give you a long answer, but it's pretty much getting saved in university, walking their walk, answering the call, stepping into ministry and the purpose, and trying to get as many people into heaven as I can with every gift and talent and skill that God's given me as well.
Beautiful. Now let me go back a little bit, if you don't mind, Pastor Robert. I notice you. Again, it's that personal relationship that I know you have with the Lord, and you're unashamed of that. But tell us a little bit about how your relationship with Christ has practically impacted your relationship with your wife, Grace, of 32 years, married for 32 years, and also your family. Let us know that, because that's where many people live, and of course everyone has a family or some relationship. So tell us, how did that help you, to grow and develop, and how has that made things very real and beautiful in your life?
Well, that's a good question, Pastor Carl. I'm glad you asked. It's one where I know everybody's case is different. My particular one, coming from a single home, mom who was working for a time, going to school for a time, and a lot of times I came home and there was nobody there. A lot of times I went to bed, there was nobody there. But I was well taken care of. But I guess the whole matter of, wanting to have the best for my family, getting married and having children. And again, unfortunately, I'm pretty sure a lot of men who are listening here, or those who are listening, the general populace, I wasn't raised by my father. So I remember a bunch of women in my life. I remember a bunch of aunts and a bunch of grandmothers and a bunch of mama nams and a whole bunch of folk that just, were there women-wise to help and to guide and to lead. And getting married, I wanted to make sure that I was going to be the husband that I need to be. So I had to really walk close to God and have God help me to be the future husband I was going to be, to Grace. And I will tell you that, like I said, after that, you become a parent then. And as a parent, man, last thing you want your child to experience are the hardships of life. And the old cliche is that you want your children to experience more blessings than you and have a better life than you, and even during the living years. And that's one thing that I had in my heart to do. So again, I had to walk with Christ. I had to do a lot of praying. There was a lot of trial and error, but there was more successes than failures, because like you said, I had that personal walk and relationship with him where he gave me insight on how to be a husband. He gave me insight on how to be a new father and how to raise my children in the nurture and admonition of the Lord, and also with practicality and spiritual balance. And I tell you, it's just one where I look back over the years, I couldn't have done it without my personal relationship and walk with Christ, because I have a whole lot of examples around. So I had to go to the library. I mean, I don't mean to sound corny. I had to go to the library and read up on some stuff. Now we have the World Wide Web where I can Google just about everything. But a lot of it came through personal perseverance, a little bit of trial and error. But the whole idea was, God, I need your help to be the husband I need to be to my new wife, the father I need to be to my 3 sons. And I tell you, it's been one where I have no regrets whatsoever. And I'm glad that I had that relationship with him, that personal relationship, for him to help me to raise up 3 sons and to be a man of honor and integrity. And just so glad that I can be able to share this information over the airwaves this morning.
That's beautiful. Now, let me just, I noticed you said a few things. You mentioned about acknowledging the home you were brought up in, very grateful to your mom who was a single parent, but then realizing that you are going to become a husband, and then a father. I noticed you emphasized your walk with Christ. You mentioned prayer. In that I hear there's a dependence on God. Lord, help me. I need help.
Yeah.
And I love that. I wrote down, you put in a perseverance. Being obedient to the instructions God gave you. So, and of course, that personal study also. You mentioned going to the library. But let me ask you this, Pastor Robert. What would you say were some key decisions? At some of our conversations, that the power of decisions, the power of choices that we make. What would you say are some of those critical ones that you made that looking back, helped you to become the man you are today?
I think it would be not making any quick decisions. Mm-hmm. I mean, God is not the author of confusion. We know He's the author and finisher of our faith. Mm-hmm. And I truly believe, the approach that I made, back in those early years, even so today, with a lot more preciseness, if you allow me to say, mm-hmm. I just went to God as a young adult, as a young father, with a childlike faith. I said, God, I don't know what to do with her. You gave me this woman. She was your daughter first before she was my woman, mm-hmm. my wife. I'm going to bring it up at the conference, too. A lot of men, like make a side note, you got to remember, husbands, you got to treat your wife right, because before she was your daughter, before she was your wife, she was God's daughter first. Mm-hmm. And I will tell you, I needed wisdom to be able to honor and respect her. And it came through prayer. It came through a personal relationship with God and hearing God. And, there are many times where God just said, hey, come, let us plead together. Mm-hmm. Put me in the limits of your word so your petition may be justified, Robert. Mm-hmm. And I said, God, you got to show me how to minister to this woman. You got to show me how to be the father to these children, because I never had a good example of what a father was. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I had to study it out. I had to do the practical part. I had to do the spiritual part. I had to listen. I had to, get out on the water and walk. I had to do things that were new to me, mm-hmm. but I was willing to persevere. And one term I like to use is drop the anchor. Mm-hmm. Dropping the anchor, it goes beyond making a mental decision. Dropping the anchor is kind of symbolic of, you going to make a decision to do this. And give an example of this. If you had a ocean vessel out there on, say, Lake Ontario somewhere, mm-hmm. and the captain of that ocean vessel wanted to stop that thing, he would drop a small apparatus called an anchor. Mm-hmm. And somewhere it would, latch on to the pretty much the Lake Ontario bed somewhere down there, and it would stop eventually. And that literally would stop that vessel from moving. And the whole idea about dropping the anchor is making a mental, physical, spiritual, and conscious decision that you are going to be the man that you need to be, the husband you need to be, the mentor, the vision carrier, the goal setter, the covering that you need to be. And again, don't give me a long answer, but those are some things we're going to bring out at this conference. But those are things that I learned early on that I was going to do. I wasn't going to be a failure. Mm-hmm. I was going to be a father to my children, a husband to my wife, be everything I mentioned a few moments ago to my family, so I could be an anointed standard, a godly influence, and that I could have joy in my family and my life.
That's excellent, man. That's beautiful. I notice you, for men listening, and this part of not just the only thing, but part of what will come up, obviously, is anyone who's married knows that if those quality decisions aren't made, that's one of the reasons why marriages become a disaster. Men have to be strong. When I heard you, I thought, well, anyone who's married to a woman, boy, they gotta. I'm not laughing. My wife's not listening. I don't think so. She's too busy right today. But anyway, but bear with me. I'm saying that anyone who's got a good wife and a strong woman realizes they got to have it together. They're not perfect, but they got to get it together somewhere.
Right.
Or else it just, you're heading for a disaster. And so I just love your honesty, where as a man, you had to make some decisions, and I can completely relate to that. The same thing with me, making a decision for Christ, but also not stopping there, but really seeking God. Lord, how do I work with this woman? How do I become the man that she needs? How do I truly love her and honor her? I hear that in your communication and the spirit of what what you're saying. You know, how do I, you know, even when we have challenges, speak to her in such a way that doesn't demean her and cause her to lose value in her own eyes, but how can I, you know, be the man that she needs? And so I just love that. The thing is this, though, just because you're married, it doesn't mean we know that. And oftentimes, because these things haven't been spoken about, many men have been left to kind of traverse these waters kind of almost blindly, trying to navigate marriage. You know, good-intentioned, well-intentioned men. You know, very good, you know, a lot of men, saved and unsaved, sincere, honest, got into marriage for the right reason and wanted to do right, but just didn't know how to do it. Didn't have a pastor, didn't have someone, an older male who was married and happily married and wanted to be married to guide them along and say, you know, this is how you do it. You know, being honest with the challenges, but at the same time facing some of the negatives and how to navigate them, how to overcome some of the obstacles that face us as men. And so I just appreciate this. As you're talking there, you know, in the conference, we're going to have men, I'm sure, from all different backgrounds. And I know, Pastor Robert, personally, we want you to know, men, that there'll be no condemnation there. You're going to come from all different backgrounds. We want you there. We love you, regardless of your background, regardless of whatever, you know, situations you came out of. We all come from different backgrounds. We've all had different stuff. But by the grace of God, we're coming together, acknowledging those things, but knowing that Christ is able to help us overcome and be the men we were born to be, or to plan and fulfill his destiny for our lives. So again, Pastor Robert, thank you so much for speaking to us. Now, let me ask you this.
Sure.
Tell us a little bit more. I know you alluded to it. You spoke a little bit very briefly, but tell us about your time as a police officer. You know, tell us about just a little bit about that, if you don't mind. Tell us, what the experience was. What was it like being a man, or is it called the Men in Blue? You know, serving and protecting.
Mm-hmm.
You know, what was that like?
Well, I will say this: it was never a dull moment, Pastor Carl.
Okay.
I mean, most of my career there was I started off in patrol operations on the street, working with the community, and then shortly after that, I went to a lot of specialized units. So most of my career was basically drugs, guns, and gangs. And I don't say it to boast; I say it because God kept me through that. He protected me through all that. I mean, my life has been threatened several times. I mean, it's been a chapter that I will never forget. But there are certain things I have to let go and put behind, and there's some things that I'll go to heaven with, because of the confidentiality of the profession. But I will say this: it helped me to become the pastor that I am today.
Gotcha.
And I used to ask myself, answering a call to go into law enforcement, I got my degree in law enforcement, and so it was one of those things where, I wanted to pursue it to its maximum potential, and in doing so, it opened up the doors for me to go in a lot of different areas of specialty. And again, I mentioned earlier, being a Christian police officer, man, I'll tell you, that was a challenge back in that day, because you had a whole lot of secret school Christians, so to speak, where they only come out at certain times. But I was pretty much I was a pretty I was balanced though. I wasn't spooky and deep. I'm pretty sure you know what I mean. I was the one where I was a person first. I was a Christian, but also I had to trust God to keep me and preserve me because I was newly married. Had a young new family, so the whole idea was, I wanted to make sure I went out here and served the community, preserve life and property, and I took an oath by the city and the state and the government to even lay my life down for my fellow man. And a lot of responsibility came with that. A lot of blessing and benefits came along with it, too, especially when it came to relating to families, in every aspect of the family, the husband, the wife, the children, extended families, families with single homes, and mothers who were raising kids, young men by themselves, A lot of my most gratifying years working with the gang squad or special crimes unit and dealing with the young kids who were just a victim of the system. I know I just work on the same thing there in Canada when I was a pastor there, touching the community there over in the Edmonton area and O'Connor area, and just some of those subdivisions, man, where God just needed to be taken, from the pulpit to the subdivision. to the curb, to the backyards, to the streets. And I will tell you, with the children, the young people who are out there, they need an example. And I will tell you, law enforcement has prepared me for what I'm doing now, and I wouldn't change anything else about it. And in doing so, it allowed me to understand, and all the young men that I've mentored and all the young men that I've got on track and kept on track, and still this very day, I still mentor some of those young fellows that I've talked to 15, 20 years ago. And most of them are successful, law-abiding citizens who have families and are on the right track. And for those who, who adhere to, the practicality that we presented to them, that, you have to walk right before God. You have to obey the law. You have to find out what the purpose is in your life, and, so that they, first of all, get them saved, get them born again, and once we do that, then, like I said, God will put us on a path for them to have good success. And I will tell you, law enforcement is something that I treasure, and I tap in sometimes to some of the wisdom that I learned back then and apply it to now, being a senior pastor and having a church and, dealing with people, because people are the same wherever you go. And they have issues, just good, bad, ugly, stinky, and everything else. But when God is put on the forefront and he's given glory and he's sought after for wisdom and direction, we can look at that as being one of the first steps to having success in every area of our lives.
When you just said it again, notice he said, again, always saying God, seeking God for wisdom and direction. I can imagine you said being a part of the, I guess, the drugs, gangs, and squad, and drugs, guns, and gang squad. And so, if anything, you needed a lot of wisdom to navigate that and to, be an answer, to be in love, be lawful, but at the same time bring answers and be an instrument of God in that community and helping people. So that's just wonderful, just excellent. Any question? Anything else?
Pastor, this is Claremont here. I want to ask you a question. As I was listening to you, knowing that you were a police officer before actually going into full-time ministry, would you say your training as a police officer helped to bring some kind of, give you some kind of discipline in order to walk with God?
Brother Carl, I think one of the things that it did, it allowed me to be more of a people person.
Okay.
When you think about, a police officer, they basically take an oath and they swear to uphold the laws of the land and protect property and life and things of that nature. And what comes along with that is relationship.
Right.
Relationship between the police entity and the community, or the people that make up the neighborhoods and the community. So one of the things that I just really focused on was relationship. I've defined it a little bit more in my tenure as a pastor, and I basically define it as covenant relationship. Meaning that, even as a law enforcement officer, every person who's afraid of the law is the folk who are doing wrong. Look what Romans chapter 13 said, right? The law was put together for those who do wrong. For those individuals who appreciate you being in the community, walking the beat, and not just helping the cat out of a tree, the people who appreciated you were the ones who looked at you as an individual to help keep the peace in their community, in their home, to call up, to be an individual that they could call or summon upon for assistance as it related maybe to a legal matter. So, it prepared me a lot. It helped me a lot. But one of the things that I value the most and treasure the most, even now today, is covenant relationships.
Now, let me ask you this. I was going to ask a question.
Go ahead. The question I was going to ask you following that one is, being a police officer, you would have seen many different types of personalities, and especially in women, because there's some challenges that are happening today with a lot of men that is undercover. Whereas we have, as you talked earlier about God enabling you to deal with your wife, and recognizing that before she became your wife or your woman, I like the woman thing because it sounds a little more personal. This is my lady, man, that she was God's child first, correct?
Correct.
Right. Now, there are some cases today that is kind of like almost like a hidden thing that I think there's a direct attack on men, because you find a lot of men are not in churches today based on the simple fact that their wives who are in churches will be one person in church but another person at home. And sometimes it almost comes because and I will tell you this personally, that most of us don't understand this thing called postpartum depression that affect a lot of women, and they act out differently. Would you say, as being trained, I'm not saying this is what happened to you, that would help you to recognize certain things? Because as a young man growing up, that's one thing I never knew about, didn't understand it, couldn't comprehend it at any point in time, and therefore my response would have been totally different.
Yeah, actually, we think about the postpartum thing. That's something that's significant and can and should not be ignored. But as it relates to the relationship between the husband and the wife, that would probably be a sidebar that I would suggest the pastor, their pastor, could address in an individual one-on-one counseling session. When it comes to me or an individual who's in law enforcement, again, I'll say this as something I'm very proud of. Some of the best partners I've ever worked with were females. And I'm not ashamed to say that. You think about going to a particular police run, and you got, myself being a male, then I got a male partner, man, we got a whole lot of testosterone going up into that place. And I will tell you, having a female partner helps balance the whole thing out. It makes us more of a well-balanced and versatile crew answering a distress call, if you understand what I mean. And again, it's not to put the fellow brother down. I just like to have as much value and as much things in my arsenal if I'm going to bring resolution to a matter. And I mean, it could be my personal opinion, but I will tell you, some of the best partners I've had in law enforcement has been a member of the opposite sex, a woman.
Now, when you said that, I like the fact that, and we've talked about this a little bit, is that you understand boundaries. And I find, successful people understand boundaries. We understand our limitations. We understand, as men, we understand also the strengths of women. But there's something else, going back to the question Claremont was asking, and that is understanding that in a situation of postpartum depression, Pastor Robert understanding his limitations.
Right.
And that in a situation like that, it's unfortunate that that person should have had a pastor in their life who'd be able to help that woman. You see what I'm saying? So sometimes we're seeing where there's a lack of the right person. Whether the person didn't go to that individual or the person who had that authority in their life didn't take the initiative or didn't minister to that family, and oftentimes might have been a reason why something fell apart. I'm not saying there's complete responsibility, but again, there's those boundaries, there's recognizing those strengths, but recognizing that if we don't, what it can do in other people's lives.
What I noticed too with you, Pastor Martin, is the fact that you had what I call some good foundation. You had mom and them, grandma and them, sister and them, the mom, the different females around you that would have given you quite a wide variety of understanding a woman from a different perspective. Some of us didn't have that opportunity. Maybe an only child growing up with a single mother and she's working so many jobs and things like that. So they fall short, and then you go into pastors today, and this is the important thing. The pastors, they need to upgrade themselves in the sense of understanding things about what happens to women. Some pastors are totally oblivious to what's going on, and they don't really understand that a woman could go into this kind of postpartum depression and act out completely different from what the man knows about, or what he's seeing a different wife in his room, and he just don't know how to deal with that. And how do you tell a man, hey, this is what is happening? You're talking almost 20 years later, I begin to find that out. You know what I'm saying? So before that is, how do you tell a man that, listen, something is different here? Like, chronicle back how it was at the beginning to what it is now. What has changed? What caused it to be this way?
So are you saying, how do you tell a man, if you've identified a situation, how do you get his attention?
Correct, because most of them don't even want to believe it. They don't want to believe, like, okay, my wife, no, man, she's just being crazy, and blah, 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 and they run off with that. And you got to be able to know how to tell them without making them feel less than themselves at the same time, because they will feel at that point, you're picking up for the woman, and you're throwing me out to the wolves kind of thing. How do you deal with something like that?
Yeah. So encouraging a man to better relate to his wife. Go ahead.
Yeah, I would say this, and again, that's about the fourth time that topic has come up, in this conversation, and it sounds like it's something that needs to be addressed, but it has to be addressed properly.
Correct.
I was sitting in back four. I've been married for 32 years. 32 years, knowing my wife for 35 years.
Mm-hmm.
And pretty much, I don't have a perfect marriage, but I got a real good marriage.
Mm-hmm.
And it took a lot of work.
That's right.
It took a lot of stick-to-itiveness. It took a lot of keeping people out of your business. It took a lot of Matthew chapter 18, verse 18 and 19, where two agree on earth as touching. It came to a point where we kept drama out of our life, and that's why after 32 years, we still love each other and we still like each other. But I will tell you this, it was a lot of work. Women are not complicated. They are just complex. And in saying so, a man has to study. I don't even have the subject matter. He has to study his wife to know. And I think I'm getting ahead of myself now. I feel like it's June 22nd, 23rd. But let me back up a little bit. I mean, I've learned some things over the years. And Brother Coleman, I mentioned the fact of having a lot of women around me. That wasn't my desire. My desire was to have a model man or model men that I could fashion myself after. But unfortunately, that was lacking in my life. I did have some, but it wasn't influential as it should have been or what I wanted it to be. But I had a bunch of women, and I don't look down on that at all. I wish there would have been more men, so I had to do a lot more homework and a lot more study, a lot more plan to find out how to be the husband and the father and the vision setter and the goals, the goal achiever and the covering and everything else. But let's go back to what you're saying. I had to learn, I had to study grace. I had to pray God to give me wisdom about my wife.
Exactly.
I mean, you think about how when it comes to communication, we'll talk about this also, during the men's honor conference. Communication. I mean, if communication is not working right, nothing's going to be right.
You got it.
The money's not right, the sex not right, social life's not right, the food ain't right, the dog ain't happy, the hamster's going to run away, everything's going to be crazy. If the communication is not effective. So my wife and I have learned how to effectively communicate.
That's it, man.
Whereas we are very totally different. I was giving a guy an example if I got time. I was telling a guy there was an issue that happened in his marriage. Nothing that was like a crash and burn, but it was something major where it did kind of, take away the stability of the home for a little bit. And so the husband had made a decision. He made a mistake. We all make them. Put your rocks down. We all make them. And he made the mistake, but he realized he made the mistake. He had the family meeting with his wife and realized, I made a mistake. My bad. I'm sorry. Let's go out and have some dinner and have something to eat. And she's saying, no, dude, we're not going out to eat nowhere. Because, men have to understand we're very logical. God made us logical. We have to have bounce-back ability. We have to have buoyancy. And a lot of times the wife misunderstands the husband's ability to bounce back because he has to.
He has to.
In other words, if a husband and a wife are on the sea, on a boat someplace, and they're getting close to the reef, he's got to be watching and make sure what he's doing so he doesn't crash. In other words, the only person who has a right, listen, make a note on this, the only person that has a right to trip out in a family is the wife. Now, I want to define that, what I mean.
I got you.
The wife, God made the wife more emotional. Doesn't make her less. That makes her just who she is and how God wired her and how men are made. Men are very logical. We make a mistake, boom, my bad. Let's go on. The wife is like, no, she's been affected by these things emotionally, psychologically, and physically. So when he understands that when something goes down in the household or in his camp, she's affected these three different ways, mentally. He's affected one way, logically, on the decision that he made. So he can bounce back real quick. My mistake, my bad. I made the adjustments not to do that again. Let's go out and have dinner. Let's have some sex. She said, man, get off me. Don't touch me. I mean, she's affected in all these different ways. And when he gets to understand how his wife is wired in every way, and she understands how God made him, her husband, they're going to get along a whole lot better. They'll have a lot of better understanding when things happen.
Excellent.
That's a very short answer to what you're saying, but I'm looking forward to bringing this out in detail at this Men of Honor conference.
Well,
and I'll tell you.
You mentioned it. See, what I took from that, it's work. Anyone who's married from any time and again, that is in an enjoyable marriage, a loving marriage, it took work. Took a decision, took a choice.
Yeah.
It's gonna be some work, but it took some work.
Yeah, it takes a lot of work, and I mentioned something else too. It takes keeping people out of your business.
Oh, that's a big one. That's a huge. Man, don't let me go with that one. That's a. Go ahead.
I'm not gonna start with that either.
That's bigger than.
Wait, Pastor, I'll give you a little bit, just a little bit.
Yeah, go ahead, man.
You know, my wife came from a big family. My family was a little bit smaller. But one thing we said we would do is we would keep everything in house. That doesn't mean we don't go to people for wisdom,
That's right.
you know, and stuff like that. But when it came to, let me put it this way, the most powerful thing God ever created, He created beasts of the field, fowls of the air, everything that creeped and crawled. But man, let me tell you, one of His prized possessions, most powerful thing God ever created was a godly man and a virtuous woman in holy matrimony.
That's right.
There is literally nothing they cannot do and nothing they cannot achieve according to the Word of God. You have to do it by the Word of God. I mean, I mentioned Matthew 18, verse 18, 19 earlier. And that's a powerful scripture. You know, two shall be on earth as touching. You know, whatever they declare unlawful, lawful, it shall or shall not be done. It's not a marriage scripture, but it's a believer's scripture, where two shall agree on earth as touching. It's not touching and agreeing. Man, we quoted that wrong for centuries. Ain't got nothing to do about the touching. It's the power of the agreement.
That's it.
And holy matrimony between a husband and wife, a man and a woman, when they come into agreement on something, according to the Word of God, I don't need no other opinions, man. I don't need to talk to nobody else.
That's it.
If it's according to the Word of God, so what you end up doing is you end up inadvertently keeping people guessing. When this couple decides to do a new house, they're not telling everybody about it. They're just, you know, the next family engagement, hey, come to this address, we're having a little food. Well, whose address is this? I said, new address. Well, how long you been there? Oh, about 3 months. I couldn't even told me.
That's it.
You know, when you drive at the next family event in a brand new vehicle, or pre-owned, doesn't matter. Hey, when you get that car? About 3 months ago. I couldn't even tell us. The whole idea is you keep people out of business because you don't need a whole bunch of opinions.
Boy, that's good, man. Pastor, that is, I told you, one of the keys to our marriage.
Yeah.
Day one, I refuse to be family member, parents. Could be parents. And you know me, I honor my parents.
Yeah.
But the thing is, making sure I wouldn't be, they knew they couldn't say anything bad or negative around me, about Colleen in my presence. You know what? That's a protection.
Yeah, it
that
is.
was being
It
protecting, but it also means you're not allowing certain things from the outside into your relationship. And I'm telling you, a lot of men and women, they're so close. Don't get me, you're really close to your family, but their family's opinions and relationships, they're so intertwined, they've caused relationships to be extremely unhealthy.
And then there's this other thing too, the power of the tongue.
Yeah, well, that's what that is. Yeah.
When somebody starts to talk, life and death is in the power of the tongue. When somebody's talking against your marriage, you got to fight through that. And so the less you keep them out, the stronger you be as a team to fight against those outside interjection.
Now, our time's coming down, but I need to ask this. There's a question. You were asking a question, and this came to my mind. So I wanted to ask you, Pastor Robert, since you were a police officer, now, you know, the current climate, and again, I don't want to throw you off a little bit, but I'm sure you'll be okay with it, but just acknowledging there's a lot of challenges, I'm going to say, with the relationship of law enforcement to the community. And let's say with some of the things we've seen in the community, for example, some of the negative treatment of law enforcement towards people of color. Now you have, you know, on one side, to be honest, you're seeing the obvious, but we've got some other extremes where there's people almost acting like there's no such thing. So I'm going to ask you this, if you don't mind me asking. What's the best way we can, of course we pray, we do it as a church, pray for law enforcement, all those in authority every week. But as Christians, real law-abiding, godly Christians, how can we be salt and light to that situation? Does that make sense? I'm just saying because some of this stuff in different communities, because it's not just media-driven, but just certain things that you're seeing and that you're aware of. You know, how can we be an answer? How can we be salt and light? How can we be wise yet positive and loving to people in our community, or I better say it this way: how can we be individuals that foster a more healthy and positive relationship between us and law enforcement officials? Maybe that's the best way to say it. Does that make sense?
That's a big question.
So I know not really much time, but briefly, go ahead.
Yeah, well, first of all, you can't have a microwave solution to a crock pot problem. Mm. Something has been going on for a long time. It's been unchecked. There's been no accountability in certain areas. Mm-hmm. I will say this. There has to be one where we come to the round table. Mm-hmm. I know there's friction between, even when I was there, for the 7-year tenure I was there, I got on board, or I think it was maybe the 44th or 40th Division over in Scarborough. Mm-hmm. I was part of one of their board members, and I was there to help assist, not to bring a U.S. resolution to a Canadian problem in law enforcement. Mm-hmm. It was just a law enforcement issue that I had some expertise on, and I was able to willing to help, that law enforcement division to be better at what they did. Mm-hmm. It's going to take some communication. It's going to be some sitting down at the table. It's going to take education. Mm-hmm. Nobody knows what it's like to be a police officer unless you, do go riding with them one night, or you sit down and talk to them. As a police officer, I was a husband, I was a father, I was a friend. Mm-hmm. I was all the other things that come along in life. Mm-hmm. But when I put on the uniform, or I put on the badge, things didn't change per se of who I was. I just put on an additional hat. Mm-hmm. And this hat was something that I put on that I was called to do at that time and chapter of my life. Mm-hmm. So again, when it comes to the frictions happening right there in your province and your cities, it's going to have to be one where we pray for the leadership like you're doing, but in addition to praying for the leadership, we're going to have to set some meetings aside so that we can talk and address the issues at hand, and then bring resolution. We have to follow through on these resolutions. Mm-hmm. We can't just talk about them. We have to do something where we follow through and have some accountability on both sides or all sides that are involved.
I'm just putting a note on. And so prayer, resolutions, and follow through. And I know that's a loaded question, but thank you so much for that response, Pastor Robert. Really appreciate you today. Now, just before we go, or you go, or we go. Another comment?
I'm pretty much.
Good.
I'm good.
All right.
Yeah.
Now, Pastor Robert, I want to know regarding the upcoming conference, the Men of Honor conference on again June 22nd and the 23rd. Of course, you'll be speaking for us on the Sunday. Again, we really appreciate you coming. It's going to be a great time. Now, just a question: why is this conference important?
It's important because, first of all, you heard from God, Pastor Carl. Mm-hmm. With what you've been doing with the broadcast and what you've been doing over at Foundation for Life, this is just an extension and a continuation to you and Pastor Colleen's prayers on what God's called you all to do. And you know me, when I was there, mm-hmm. you and I had connected in a way whereas, it was definitely divine. Mm-hmm. But it was one also whereas God touched your heart to tap into your resources. Mm-hmm. And remember, I'm coming as not only as a speaker, I'm coming to assist you, my brother in Christ, mm-hmm. where we do like, King Arthur did with all the others around the round table. Exactly. When they took their crowns off and laid their swords across the flame, they were all equal at the round table. Mm-hmm. So when I come out to your church, I'm coming to be an assistant and serve you and mm-hmm. to assist you in what God has called you to do. Mm-hmm. Addition to that, I'm bringing whatever expertise and skill sets that I have mm-hmm. humbly to help you or help the vision that God's giving you mm-hmm. for your church and what God has called you to do to bring it to fruition. Mm-hmm. So again, it's one of those things whereas we're here to help touch the lives of the men in your church and your community, mm-hmm. Extended family members who happen to be, the male aspect of the family, because like you get a man can change a nation. He can turn a nation around. And we just want to get his heart. We just want to let him know that God loves him. Mm-hmm. And, just some of the things I'm going to be bringing. We're going to talk about communication. I mean, I don't want to kind of give it away, but a couple of hors d'oeuvres, so to speak, is, the communication. You know, we're going to talk about, you know, how to make her feel special. We're going to talk about how to be her knight in shining armor. We're going to talk about how to, you know, be ministered to and how to minister. We're going to talk about sex. We're going to talk about money. We're going to talk about unity. We're going to talk about in-laws, outlaws. We're going to talk about all of them. And, you know, the 32 years or so of ministry I have in my life, you know, when you asked me to do this, Pastor Carl, I just went before God, and I'm just going to be candid. I'm going to be raw. I'm going to be intellectual. I'm going to be ghetto. I'm just going to bring it.
Just
because
bring it,
I want to pour into the lives of every person who have ears to hear at this conference these 2 days. And we're going to pray that the Word of God, the practical and the spiritual, falls on good ground. It brings forth a harvest where hopefully, you know, when these men, you know, go back home, be it married, being the single guys too, for their future families and wives, that they will be men of integrity, men of character. There will be anointed standards, godly influences, where they will literally be able to change not just their families and their household, but change their communities and change the whole greater Toronto area, man. I'm looking forward to being there and just being a part of what God has called you to do, Pastor Carl.
This is good, man. This is excellent, man. This is good. You know, you mentioned, you know, I know you got Claremont. You can't see him, but Claremont's looking a little bit excited. You see, you mentioned, you didn't want to give away the hors d'oeuvres. No, he was giving us some hors d'oeuvres. But you know what? When you think about going to a restaurant, you look at a menu. So you're right in giving us a menu. We're asking for the menu, Pastor, because, you know, before people come, you've kind of given us a kind of a flavor. You know, like this is on the menu. This is on the menu. You understand? So, man, this has been excellent. This has been a thrill.
Before you go quickly, Pastor, we just got about 3 minutes to go. Let's say less than 3 minutes. There is something that, and you don't have to answer this now, but put this on your plate, or on your menu. There's some men out there that have no desire to be married. They just want to be single men doing what they do. And I really want you to speak on that. Because a lot of times we forget those guys. Those single guys. We know about single women who comfortable, but what about the single guys? Because nobody believes they can be a single guy. When somebody says, I'm not interested in getting married. I'm like, you look at the guy, I'm like, what?
Yeah, I got you.
What are you talking about? Man, you're a man.
Like, I'm not interested. So, all right, we'll see that. Put it on the board there. Maybe on the menu.
On the menu.
But again, Pastor Robert, thank you. Go ahead. You want to say something? Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, you know, you think about this, and you think about where, to your question, you know, guys who want to be single, nothing wrong with being single. Okay, but the whole idea is that God says it's not good for men to be alone.
There you go, man.
I told you don't answer the question. Now, we already have 2 minutes left. Let's go to a whole Pandora's box right now.
There sometimes may be a need for singleness in a chapter of a man's life. I mean, you know, we've counseled hundreds, probably thousands of couples, single, married, divorced, everything else. But the whole idea, we know the word is not good for men to be alone. Why? And I'll close out with this answer, this short answer. It's not good for men to be alone because we need help.
That's good. That's good, man.
And that's a good thing.
All right.
Well, Pastor Robert, we're coming to the end of our time. We're really looking forward to you June 22nd and the 23rd for our Man of Honor conference. Thank God for you. You are a man of honor. It's going to be a great time. But thanks for speaking with us today. God bless you till next time. All right?
God bless you, too. We love you. Look forward to seeing you. Talk to you next time.
Regards to Grace, please. Pastor Grace. Bye-bye.
All right, sure will.
Bye-bye.
All right, bye-bye.
All right, there it is.
Yep. Thank you, folks. See you later.
See you next time.
Thank you for joining us today on Rebuilding the Black Family with Pastor Carl Lewis and myself, Claremont Humphrey. We trust you found this program helpful. Please give us your feedback on our Facebook page, Foundation for Life Church. Also, visit us at foundationforlife.ca, where you will find some free life-building resources. Join us next time for another edition of Rebuilding the Black Family. Until then, build your life and family on the sure foundation of Jesus Christ.